do you think AMD's Radeon division will ever have their Zen moment where they can compete neck and neck with their main competitor? So, Nvidia in this case. Honestly, no. Like, no.
Yeah, based on everything that I've seen in my time reviewing these sort of things, not that I review the GPUs and stuff, but
I've been waiting a long time.
But, we've been doing this for a long time, you about twice as long as me, and in that time there's always been the thought that this will happen, like at some point they will do something.
This generation.
But it hasn't happened. So I think if we're just going on trends right, it's probably not going to happen. And again, the reason why AMD was able to have their Ryzen moment is because Intel made some pretty significant blunders with their CPU division, with things like their fabrication process stalling quite a bit, having issues getting those new nodes out the door, which sort of meant they had to redo the same architecture or repeat the same architecture quite a few times. And funnily enough, they're sort of almost doing that again now to some lesser of a degree, but they're still doing it at the moment. But basically that stumble in the Skylake era gave AMD this big opportunity to fix their architecture and improve it while their main competitor wasn't really doing all that much. And that's the Ryzen moment that we got. With Nvidia, they haven't really stumbled. Like, I know we can say that there's some poor value products in the 40 series and there hasn't been a lot of improvement in some areas, but the 4090 is still a big leap in performance. The 3090 was a big leap in performance. The 2080 Ti was a big leap in performance. So they keep adding performance, they're adding new features, they're innovating on all those fronts that it doesn't give AMD that opportunity to improve while their competitor doesn't. Nvidia's always improving, whereas Intel didn't for a while.
That's definitely true, but at the same time, it ignores the fact that AMD was so aggressive in making Ryzen work.
Yes, but they were a lot further behind.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like, even today, they're still fairly aggressive with what they're doing. Like, there's a lot of price cuts. CPUs are dropping down. To me, it still feels like even in their more dominant position, let's say, they're still cutting prices of CPUs. They're still ensuring that they're seeing high volumes of sales with the CPUs, and they're really pushing them. They're really making an effort to push them out the door. But beyond just that as well, there's the things like platform support that they're doing stuff that I guess the point I'm trying to make is they're doing things their competitors not doing. They're not just following in Intel's footsteps. They're like, oh, you lock most of your products down from being overclocked, so we're just going to offer overclocking on our X processors and everything else is locked. They haven't done that.
Right, so you're sort of saying, like, why hasn't Radeon done the open platform?
They've been more bold. Yeah.
Like, where's those killer features that the competitor's not doing to incentivize
competitive pricing, all that. You just look at it, it's two different approaches. It's basically two different companies in what they've done over the last 7 years with Ryzen. There's so many different aspects of Ryzen that you can look at that they're doing either better than their competitor or they're just doing it, period. And they're being so much more aggressive, and Radeon's just like,
I guess in some ways, like,
floundering.
A lot of those features that we've been talking about were established quite a while ago, like things like unlocked CPUs, open platform support, being aggressive on pricing. Those are all carryovers from quite a while ago. They haven't, as they've gotten more dominant, there's been less of those, what's another feature that you could add to that pile? Whereas, I guess, benefiting them is the fact that Intel has not competed on those features, so they're still a selling point for them, right?
They've innovated though with stuff like 3D V-Cache, which is
they have
pun intended, like a game changer. So there's been more things happening there, whereas Radeon's just like, oh damn, Nvidia released a new feature. Well, we'll have an inferior version of that ready for you in 12 to 18 months. Our GPUs aren't quite as good. I guess we'll knock $30 off, and that should see them sell right well. And then, and just even dumb stuff like, again, try and explain. I can't stress enough, it happened to this generation where they thought it would be okay to release the 7900 XT, which made no sense in their own product lineup, for $900 US.
Well, they did it twice because they did it with the 7700 XT as well.
That was less egregious, but still, like, how is that they making these mistakes? And you think, oh well, there's some kind of strategy going on there. They're doing this, but then was it even a month where they pretty much openly acknowledged that that was a massive stuff up, and they dropped the price.
Pretty much.
So it's just it's weird, but based on everything that I've seen in my time doing this, and just the current dumb stuff they're doing, like I just mentioned, no.
Yeah, I mean that's right. I think that, and we've talked about this when this sort of questions have come up previously, is that the things that, firstly, if for Radeon to get even close to doing what has been discussed in this question, they have to be getting those basics right.
They're not taking the initial baby steps.
Yeah, they need to get the fundamental, simple things right. So not making products have no sense in the product line, making sure that the pricing is very competitive and that it makes sense to buy, making sure that your products offer a decent amount more generation over generation. Things like the RX 7600, questionable whether that was even worth buying. You know, it didn't suffer from it made no sense in the lineup, but it's like, would you buy that or a 6600? So,
and then they released the 16 gigabyte version, which they could have just done from the start, made it $300, and they'd probably have a winner on their hands.
Yeah, I know.
I know people say that, it can't, it's a marketing gimmick. That card can't use 16 gigabyte of VRAM. That's wrong. That is fundamentally wrong. I mean, fire up Halo on the RX 7600 and then fire up on the 7600 XT, and you'll see that one on Ultra can load textures even at 1440p and the other one can't. But it can use the memory, and the point is it's an advantage to them. And again, it's just another Radeon blunder. Like, it's funny that they made a big deal out of the VRAM capacity stuff for Radeon 2. Like, they made official press releases and they made official slides that they circulated to generate sales of those GPUs, saying they had more VRAM than their competition, and that was a real reason to buy AMD because they lasted longer and they blah, 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 blah. They made all these points, and they go to the next generation. They're like, yeah, so we'll offer $300. 8 gigs is fine, right?
Yeah,
you don't like that? Last minute, knock $30 off. That'll get us over the line. Like, it's almost like it's not planned.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that don't really make too much sense, and it even goes back to things like the whole, do games have FSR and DLSS? Like, what's going on there? And it would have been much more beneficial for them to just explain the situation up front as soon as possible, rather than letting that fester for several months until they eventually addressed it. And
I don't
really want to bring that up, but it's
again.
like, it's just another example of, if they are making these moves, explain them. What's going on there.
The only logical reason in their defense that they couldn't explain that was because what they were accused of was true. And
sure, if you want to bring that up again.
Oh, sure. I don't want to. No, in their defense though, which isn't really defense. But all I'm saying is, like, sometimes there can be explanations for things that can't be explained.
That you don't want to explain.
Well,
right?
You don't want to explain, or there's more information behind the scenes that you don't know. But I'm saying that's probably a poor example of making the point we're making because, essentially they incriminated themselves by not clearing their own name when they easily could have done so. But that's a huge can of worms that AMD fans around the world are still uncomfortable with. So let's move on.
Well, that's right. I think as well with this discussion, there's obviously other areas that are much harder for AMD to compete with. Like, for example, just creating a DLSS competitor is not like they can just put a few people on it and then bam, it's done in like a week, right? Yeah, it takes a lot of work to get that feature out, and Nvidia has been continually improving that feature over time as well, adding things like ray reconstruction and those things over time. And so the software things, I kind of understand that, while it would be nice to see them release a feature that they're first to in the software front that makes you want a Radeon GPU, and at the same time they have to compete with all these Nvidia features. It kind of makes sense that it takes them a while to get those features out. But what makes no sense are the basic things. Like, figure out all the your frame generation good and your upscaling good, work on all that in the background. But while that's taking time and while you're a little behind, you have to sort of concede that for a little bit. Ray tracing performance, another area, they kind of have to concede that their hardware isn't up to scratch for that just yet. While you're doing all that, just nail the basics. Get your marketing right. Make sure that all the products make sense. Make sure that you're not marketing one thing and then changing it later because you release a card that makes no sense with that marketing, like your 8 gig GPUs. Make your pricing right. Get the basics right so you don't get bad reviews. You don't sully the brand, which is sort of what's been happening. And yeah, I think things would be a lot better. But as for having their Radeon moment or their Ryzen moment where they compete with Nvidia. Nvidia's not going to let them do that, so they're just going to have to continue fighting it out. Really,
Yeah, I mean they're not going to let them do it, and they're also not trying nearly hard enough to make it happen. So.
That's right.